Welcome to Off With Their Headlines. I'm your co-host, Amanda Matta, and I'm joined by the lovely Meredith Constant, as always. It's not like this is a special occasion.
Listen, if you've been with us for a while, this is nothing new. We act like it's a surprise. Now, Amanda, before we get into it, we are recording on Monday. How are you doing this Monday morning as a Pennsylvania girly?
Go Birds, that's all I have to say. Man, did you watch the Super Bowl?
It was on in our household, and I knew
you were in the vicinity.
I knew from, because I can read numbers, and I know numbers going up are good, numbers going down or not
staying
moving
at zero
are bad. And it seemed like from the get-go, the Chiefs were overwhelmed. And
it was
yikes.
It was rough. I was loving every second as a former Philadelphia girly. I don't know much about the sport of football, but I do watch the Super Bowl. And I do love me some Eagles, as did Princess Diana, famously the only NFL team she ever repped. And it was more about the colors of the jacket than anything else, but I'll take it, you know?
And what's really cool is I think his name is Jalen
Hurts.
He plays a position for the Eagles.
Yes. I can't even tell you which one. Oh, no, I'm going to get crucified. He's a quarterback.
Yeah, I thought he was, but I was like, I don't want to say that in someone.
And he's very young, so it was a big, big deal for him.
And he has an all-female team around him.
Yes. Fantastic.
And when someone asked him, hey, did you intentionally pick all women to represent you, to do your mark, all these things, he said, no, I just picked the best, and it just happened to be all women. And I said, yes.
Which, you know,
that's what I'm talking about.
In this post-DEI America, we do choose people based on merit. And if, hey, the best person for the job happens to be a woman, that's who you should be hiring. So bravo, Jalen Hurts. Bravo, Eagles.
Bravo, Eagles. Bravo, Bradley
Philadelphia.
Cooper, very happy.
Bradley Cooper. And Anne Hathaway was there being very happy. It was just
I saw a very funny tweet that was like, Bradley Cooper flaps like an eagle, like someone who has done movement classes at a prestigious conservatory school. It's so true. Feel the eagle, feel the fluidity. You could see it. It was a real good eagle.
It was a good game.
I'm not gonna lie.
It was a good game.
The halftime show with Kendrick Lamar, it started and I said, oh, there's a subset of people who is going to hate this, but the messaging in there and then going online and reading some things that I didn't catch or didn't know about. But Samuel L. Jackson as Uncle Sam and saying this is to get, I mean,
and Serena Williams.
American flag, the broken. I said, is that Serena Williams? And my stepfather didn't reply, but
it was.
I didn't know that she dated Drake. I didn't know that whole thing.
There's a lot. There are layers here, which I am only somewhat brushed up on, but Serena Williams doing the crip walk during the performance, which apparently is something she did at Wimbledon and like got a lot of pushback for.
Yes.
Now she's doing it at the Super Bowl halftime. So what do you want? You know? So I loved it.
That
I loved every second.
Incredible. I found out that Kendrick Lamar is a Gemini with a Libra rising, and that feels like it tracks.
Feels
the right amount of petty and in flare jeans.
Yes.
I mean, I can't hate a man that does that.
A good boot cut.
A good boot cut. But just seeing, I mean, again, the imagery, the built off the backs of everyone who made up that flag. The American flag was a person of color.
And also speaking truth to power. I mean, Donald Trump was the first president to attend a Super Bowl yesterday.
What a jump scare during John Baptiste's beautiful rendition of America the Beautiful. I was not ready for that. Wait, he's saying no.
The national anthem.
Yeah, sorry. Seeing him perform and then that jump scare, I screamed. I was not ready for that, but what a beautiful performance. I think, good job. Go team. Great job.
Go team, go sports. Yeah, the broadcast as a whole really held a mirror up to where we are as America right now. And isn't that what the Super Bowl is really about?
There you go. And commercials. So obviously Amanda loved the Super Bowl, and we love love over here.
We love love.
We love love. I love love. And today we're going to do a love-themed episode because this is coming out right before Valentine's Day. I'll let you know now because we will have recorded it. We are doing a special Patreon this month. We are reviewing Red, White, and Royal View. Nope. That was the knockoff version.
I haven't heard of that.
Okay, that was the straight to DVD version that Candace Cameron Bure's company did.
Right, sure.
Because it was view of returning to the traditional family. And so it was a straight couple that fell in love.
I'm following.
Yes. So that's Red, White, and Royal View.
What we watched was not that.
We actually decided to watch the original, which was Red, White, and Royal Blue, which I had read the book. I had not seen the movie. And let me tell you something. I have a lot of opinions on
Okay.
Uma Thurman's accent.
Same. And I've only seen the movie. I have not read the book. So we are going to be recapping that over on Patreon, and maybe we'll find some common ground between the literary inclined and the Amazon Prime video inclined.
I have a lot of questions about when the UK became a formidable trade partner post-Brexit, to the point that it's going to impact the middle class workers in the Midwest. I have questions about the campaign strategy. There's some campaign finance, some campaign violations. I mean, we're going to get into all of it. So that's going to be over on our Patreon. We also have a free feed. Like, go over there and join. Even if you don't want to pay, don't pay. We have community notes. We have a chat going on right now about Invictus games, which I guess will still be going on when you listen to this. And we also have our mailbag still open. We have a post where we're asking for questions on anything that you would like us to talk or answer in an upcoming episode. So without further ado, let's get into burying the lead. And for this one, we're going to do a throwback. And we're, of course, going to do a body language expert because, wow, the heavy lifting that they do to tell us how people are feeling about one another. So this one is from The People. It's August 27th, 1995. And it says, "Body is talking again, and it could mean that she wants you back." And obviously we are talking about Princess Diana and Prince Charles. And this is an exclusive, of course it is. Princess Diana is all smiles as she gives her husband the sort of lingering look he has not seen for years. And experts who studied her body language in these pictures yesterday gave their verdict. She could want him back. Her astonishing display of warmth left Charles at first confused and then delighted. These pictures clearly show the couple looking friendlier than at any time since their marriage broke down. Now, this was at a VJ Day ceremony.
No, it wasn't. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, which included Charles's mistress. It says Mistress Camilla Parker Bowles, okay? We were not calling her the love of his life, which we're going to get into. No, it's mistress. It just says mistress. And it said it befuddled onlooker. Oh, psychologists who haven't talked to Diana, believe lonely Diana secretly longs for a reconciliation with her estranged husbands. The experts say that her body language shows that she wants to salvage a relationship from the ruins of their marriage. Because everybody wants Charles. Everyone wants these men who've been terrible to them. She must want him back, because who couldn't want the future king?
This is bananas. How would you say this is aged, Meredith? Because I would say like milk.
Not well.
No. Wow. I don't even have words. I'm so sorry.
It's also, you looked at pictures and that's how you got all of this, not even video. She might be there and she might be in a good mood because she had a good time last night. Or she's going in and she's like, there's my dumb ex and his mistress, and I get to leave without this man. Right. Like Nicole Kidman when she's leaving. I don't know if it was actually getting her divorce papers, but she's triumphant.
Yeah, she claims that she was sneezing or something. Like, she claims it was not her celebrating her divorce, but like, girl.
I would be celebrating. It's hard to get out of Scientology. And here, you'll like this part. They believe Diana has been affected by the way her friend Fergie is still close to Prince Andrew.
Who are these experts? Because I need to revoke their medical license if they are really psychologists.
Everyone needs to be. Actually, there is an actual psychologist, Jane Furbank, said Diana is clearly reappraising Charles, and at times he appears to be teasing her. What psychologist goes in and says, yeah, no, I'll totally review these people and give my analysis of people that I haven't met and I haven't worked with? It's so irresponsible. It reminds me, do you remember that article that Meghan Markle is a narcissist, along with Donald Trump and Kanye West or whatever? Someone emailed her to say like, hey, by the way, like, this is weird. To say someone's a narcissist, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And the writer wrote her back and said, I'm not talking about it from the psychological standpoint of narcissist. It was some BS about I'm applying a cultural lens and looking at the societal impact of the word. Girl, please.
And if you're introduced as a psychologist, I'm sorry, that's what people are going to take away from any quote you give is, okay, we're getting a scientific perspective here. Like, come on, we know what we're doing.
Irresponsible.
Yes.
Irresponsible. It's like that article from, I think it was a doctor quote. Someone was quoted as saying, or it was like a doctor, but it wasn't a doctor of medicine, about the rush of endorphins from Charles hugging people while on his Australia tour
Oh my goodness.
would kill any germs that could make him sicker. Endorphins make you happy. It was the Elle Woods defense.
Wow. Endorphins make you happy.
Happy people
don't kill their husbands.
Don't kill their husbands. I quote that way more than I'd like to admit. Only current references. So that was our Bearing the Lead. And yeah, not much has changed when it's the same thing. Although now we can zoom in and it's easier to have the lip readers. And, you know, as we've seen, especially from Meghan and Harry, there's too much touching. There's too much kissing. There's all of that. And then when Kate and William did it for that video that is aging very weird, that video announcing that she's doing okay, the frolicking through and they're like rolling on the beach. And somehow it was like, what a lovely intimate side of the
I'm blushing. It's like, okay.
Okay, listen, calm down.
Look at pictures of Harry and Meghan making out in a booth at the stadium for the Invictus Games this week, and then tell me if you're blushing or not.
That's chemistry. That's chemistry. Those people have had children. Like he has seen her birth babies.
Do you remember in Spare, he wrote about their wedding night and the next morning they needed sustenance?
Boy, say less.
I believe
it. Less. Okay.
But we did not need a body language expert to tell us that it is written plain for all to see.
And it's more, again, it's not to rag on William and Kate, it's to rag on the media and the media's coverage of these things. And it's just, if they applied the same standard, we wouldn't be doing this, really.
Do you remember the festive glance with Will and Kate?
Do I? Or the festive bum tap? My favorite was the bum tap.
If you search festive glance, my video is the first thing to come up. There's an Urban Dictionary entry for festive glance.
Perfect. No notes.
This is fantastic. So, you know, love is one of the things we love to talk about when we consider the royals. And there are a lot of different forms of royal love, I would say. So that's what we're going to focus on today for this episode. Meredith, I think you're going to kick us off with some royal quote unquote love stories.
Oh, we sure are. We're going to kick things off with Wallis Simpson and former King Edward, no longer. To give some context, just in case you're unfamiliar with them, most people probably know the broad strokes, plus it was in The Crown. And
that helps.
The Crown. But Prince Edward was the eldest child of Mary and George V. And he was supposed to be king. Now, to be clear, no one was really enthused about this. Even his father said he's going to basically drive this into ruin in 12 months. But
he was a very charismatic Prince of Wales, so he did have that going for him.
He was very charismatic. He definitely was, but very sloppy with leaving confidential papers all over the place, the red box. Wow, we've never heard of that before. He became king. His father died, and he was in love, though, with a married woman named Wallis Simpson. She was married for the second time. She was American-born. She was divorced.
Baltimore.
So you do a lot of the time get a Meghan Markle comparison, but I think it's I don't think it really extends past being divorced and American, if I'm going to be totally honest.
That's the common denominator. Yeah,
because I've done extensive research on this woman. And basically in the beginning, it was like, it's good to have a mistress that's married who's not going to leave her husband. And Edward was, plying Wallis with access to the upper echelons in London. And she was getting jewels and all of these wonderful things, while her husband, Ernest Simpson, his family business, the shipping business, was struggling because it's World War II. We are ramping up to World War II. So she loved it. She never thought that this was really going to go anywhere, which you really see throughout their story, but go there it does. And what ends up happening is that it's a short period of time between King Edward saying, I want to be with this woman, I want to marry this woman, to abdicating. It's like a 6-week
It's
thing.
quick.
It is so quick, and things are moving so fast in a time where mail and information is not. So there's so many times where there's these missed memos or something gets like crossed. One example is when Wallis left for France because it was getting too intense in Britain.
Mm-hmm.
She had a letter printed December 7th, 1936 in the Express. Now, the Express was owned by Lord Beaverbrook, who was trying to kind of broker this, hey, Edward, let's help you so you can stay on the throne and find a way to have the woman you love, because, you know, King Edward was good for business, and Beaverbrook was hoping that, he would get the inside scoop once he was ready to talk. Everyone is doing these for their own interest. Lord Rothmere for the Daily Mail at the time hates Edward, but also he's a huge fascist, like openly a huge fascist, and,
Cool.
doesn't necessarily like the way things are going. So everyone has their own reasons for wanting to hide or expose a story.
Okay.
And to be clear, the media kept this hidden. They were not even trying to be subtle out in public, Wallis and Edward, and the media either would not print it. If stories came over from American papers, the merchants would cut them out before selling the paper, which I think you should get a discount. I mean, they really did a lot to keep this quiet, which is actually really important to know if, your king is thinking of abdicating because of a woman. But by the time her letter is printed in the Express, which is trying to say, you know what, I don't have the letter in front of me, but it was a last-ditch effort to withdraw from the situation. Edward's already in the process of abdicating. It's too late at this point, and he has convinced himself he cannot live without her. He's going to marry her, and no matter what doubts that she has. And I think there are some fair arguments that perhaps Wallis's motivation for what she's written in her diaries or even this letter was so that history would be kinder to her. There is that argument. And it's really, though, once Edward gives his goodbye radio speech days later, which was written by Winston Churchill, famously good orator, Wallis's, her fate is completely sealed. And I think that it would be good to play a little bit of the speech. This is the abdication speech, radio address written by Winston Churchill to explain to the public where he's at.
This is Windsor Castle, His Royal Highness Prince Edward. I have never wanted to withhold anything. But until now, it has not been constitutionally possible for me to speak. A few hours ago, I discharged my last duty as King and Emperor. I have for 25 years tried to serve, but you must believe me when I tell you that I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility and to discharge my duties as King as I would wish to do, without the help and support of the woman I love. And I want you to know that the decision I have made has been mine and mine alone. This was a thing I had to judge entirely for myself. The other person most nearly concerned has tried up to the last to persuade me to take a different course. It may be some time before I return to my native land, but I shall always follow the fortunes of the British race and empire with profound interest.
So that was some of Prince Edward's abdication speech. What are some of your thoughts, Amanda?
So I always come back to when we talk about Wallis and Edward, where he says it has not been constitutionally possible for him to speak. And there is this, when he's abdicating, there is this sense that he is abdicating because of some constitutional impediment to him having both the crown and Wallis. Technically, that's not true. And this is like one of those misconceptions about Wallis and Edward that I think people miss sometimes because the love story narrative has become so prevalent. But really, Edward, when he becomes king, his father dies, he announces his intention not only to marry Wallis, but to make her his queen consort. There are shades of Charles and Camilla here, which we will get to. the prime minister, Stanley Baldwin at the time, had to tell him, like, hey, it's not possible for you as the head of the Church of England to marry a divorcee. Therefore, she can't be your queen consort. Technically not true. There is a social taboo about divorcees marrying the British sovereign. It is the Church of England angle that is like actually the problem, because only since 2002 have they allowed divorced persons to remarry in the church while their former spouse is still alive. So at this time, it's kind of understood that the opposition to Edward being king is more about him as a person than Wallis. Wallis becomes the scapegoat in a lot of ways, and the reason that's given to kind of push him out. Edward he has a lot of opponents in the government. He famously referred to Labour Party politicians as cranks. He gave speeches that contradicted official government positions, ignored the advice of his ministers. So, like, nobody really liked him. And so
He wasn't
that's
popular, but I also think a misconception is like Stanley Baldwin was not trying to push this man out. He was trying to find ways to save it, but there were a lot of missteps. Like, for example, to your point about is it constitutional? Morganatic marriage was...
Yes, that was proposed. There was a plan drawn up in which Wallis could be Edward's wife, but she wouldn't become queen. So it's often called a left-handed marriage because it's a marriage where your spouse, usually a woman, does not get to take on your social rank or your titles. So she would become Duchess of Cornwall, but not a consort.
And it also, in terms of the line of succession and inheritance, I think
any children would not have been able to inherit, basically.
Yeah.
Edward just outright rejected that plan. Like, it was an option. There were roads to having the best of both worlds, but he's rejecting them. And that is what leads to the quote unquote constitutional crisis. His ministers threaten to resign if he goes forward with his plan because they've given him options. They don't want to break with tradition. It's 1936. Having a twice divorced American as queen consort is unthinkable in this world.
I think another thing that people try to use in hindsight that I think is important to be careful with is this idea that the British royal family and the government got rid of him because of his Nazi leanings, which I am not saying they were not there. Famously, he does go on a state visit where Hitler invites him. And this is after he has left the family. And this is also at a time, though, where the royal family, and this is an issue till he dies, refuses to acknowledge Wallis as HRH, Duchess of Windsor, which is her right. And they refuse to do it. And they do not treat her like he feels that she should be. So Hitler...
she is entitled to that treatment.
Exactly. Hitler does is he already knows that, I mean, Prince Edward speaks German. He loves Germany. Famously, the family is German, which is something that they're not really looking to push at the time, to the point where their name is changed to Windsor to sound, more British. And Hitler invites him and says, I'm going to do the whole state rollout, HRH, Duchess of Windsor. She is going to be, because his big thing was that people don't bow to her. And that's so they were like, we'll roll out the red carpet. Yeah. And so Prince Edward's like, yeah. And of course he goes there. He's like, I mean, I some of the plans are great. Like, the industry, blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying that.
It's tricky.
It's tricky because you also have to remember the time. It doesn't make Nazism
it's 1937,
okay.
Right.
It doesn't make it okay. It's not okay that Edward seemed to think, oh, maybe there's something to this. But I think the idea that he was both an idiot and a conniving Nazi sympathizer that was like doing all these trickeries, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
I heard a historian that basically said something along the lines of, listen, it was stupid, but it was not like some big, because there's this whole thing like Wallis is a Nazi spy, which
that's the thing that gets me. It's like, no.
I haven't seen proof of that.
No, there is none.
And when you start to dig into it, that's when it falls apart, when you start digging into it. And in fact, a lot of the reasons that the government even knew of some of Edward's plans is because they were tapping the phones of Edward. The government was spying on the king. And another thing people bring up is that Wallis was seen at parties with I forget, he's like the culture or something chancellor of Germany, who was literally sent to make inroads with these upper crust people to try to get in the correct rooms and with the right people. Obviously, you are going to try to befriend and cozy up to the mistress of the king. I think, and from what I've seen with Wallis, I don't really think she had strong political opinions. I think
No.
she loved beauty and lovely things,
Yeah.
and she loved hosting parties.
Yeah, she wanted to run in those social circles, both in Britain and in Germany at the time. The kind of top echelon of society was flirting with the Nazi party because there was this idea of prestige and, blue-bloodedness, and this was sexy at the time for a lot of these people.
Nationalism. Yeah,
Mhm.
nationalism. It's not like he came out and was like, we're going to start by, we're going
Right.
to build. It doesn't start with the concentration camps, but
Right.
that's where it goes. Also, the war to end all wars
Mhm.
just happened.
Right.
And now there might be another one. So there was also some fatigue of like, well, maybe there is a different way to do government. And maybe we could work with this guy because this has been, we already had the Great War. That's why we didn't
Mhm.
we weren't giving it a sequel.
Right.
So I just think it's important to remember in the context of the times what is going on here. Not that it excuses it, but I think the idea that the British royal family or the government was trying hard to push him out his because of
Nazi sympathies.
Nazism.
Yeah.
It doesn't really make sense. Winston Churchill did not want this. He was like one of the last people on this man's side.
I think that we know the love story angle now wasn't the full truth. So I think as people were looking for something to fill the gap there, and really
That's true.
it's political maneuvering is what played into the abdication. But we look at the love story that was spun to save face for the monarchy, not for Wallis, because Wallis is the person who loses in the history books. It's only very recently that we're reckoning with her like actual character and personality and sympathies, and we're still not doing a very good job of it because I think we've swung the other way a little bit too hard into
we
the
still
she was a
struggle with
Nazi.
it. I mean,
Yeah.
because she also like she's a complex human being that we're
Yeah.
only going to know so much about.
Anna Pasternak has a good quote. She wrote, "Being blamed in perpetuity for stealing a beloved popular king from his throne and almost destroying the British monarchy would prove to be a lifelong annihilating burden that Wallis was forced to bear."
Because of course it's her fault.
Yes, she
It's
becomes
her
the
fault.
scapegoat.
But I want to say too about the love story that was crafted that Edward delivers.
Mhm.
It really is this kind of Disneyfication of royal love stories and marrying for love and not political alliance and everything. I
Mhm.
also think that it's really dark and nefarious because the more I've read Anna Pasternak's biography and Seba, I've looked into Wallis and Edward pretty extensively, and it was about control. In many ways, Wallis was kind of mothering Edward. Like he would
Mm.
sleep at night with like pictures, like chairs set up around his bed with pictures of her, and he called her like mummy or something. I mean,
Mhm.
there was something deeply psychologically wrong going on here, and this really didn't give her an option, even if she
Right.
wanted to get out of this situation. This sealed it. She doesn't have a choice now. She's in it,
Right. Right.
and especially at that time as a woman, she what was she going to do? She wasn't going to
Right.
get a job.
He threatened to kill himself
Yeah.
if she did leave him, and
It's not love, it's
she
control.
she kept in touch with her ex-husband too, Ernest, and wrote about her plans to basically flee the United Kingdom, but she said, I just if I did it, I would have to lie to him about why I was leaving, like, it's just too much. So, the rest is
This is not
history.
a story of love,
No.
and this might have been, I don't know if it's from Pasternak's biography or not, but roughly the quote is that if Edward really loved Wallis, he
Mhm.
would have let her go.
Mm.
He would have seen what this was doing to her. He would have seen how the press was treating her. He would have let her go. That would actually be the most loving thing. But Edward was emotionally stunted in many ways. And man, that mother of his,
Makes
wow.
whew, when you bring
Whew.
up the mothering angle of their relationship, him and Wallis.
It makes a lot more
Whew.
sense.
Yeah.
And so just in case people don't know, I'm sure you do, but when he abdicates to his brother,
Mhm.
King George the
George the
Sixth.
Sixth, who is Queen Elizabeth II's father.
And so
So
here's an interesting game I sometimes play too. If Edward stays on the throne, a lot of people say that he was sterile and he probably couldn't have children. That was the assumption. And let's say he doesn't have kids, but he still lives into the 70s, which means if, George dies when he dies, let's just say he still dies on the same
50s.
trajectory.
Mhm.
She doesn't become queen until maybe the late 70s, early 80s, around the time Charles and Diana are getting married. And I just wonder what 40 years on the throne looks like when Queen Elizabeth is a princess for much
Mhm.
longer, and how that looks, how the press coverage is, and
Mhm.
not having this young, like vulnerable queen that you end up having when she becomes queen and
Right.
not having 70 plus years. I wonder if the the allure would have still been there, or would it have been, oh, great, we have this queen, great, she's in her 50s or whatever, and now we got to keep
Fuddy-duddy
doing
or
this.
whatever.
We got to
Yeah.
keep doing this after freaking
I mean,
Edward. I don't know.
Even thinking about like what would 40 years for Edward to be on the throne look like. He would have presided over the 50s and the 60s. Famously an era of counterculture and breaking points for the monarchy that even Queen Elizabeth II may not have made it out like unscathed from if things had gone slightly differently.
In the past 20 years or so, I'd say, is when Queen Elizabeth really became the grandma of the nation. She has been in service for a ridiculous amount of time. She is someone that generations have grown up with at this point. And I wonder if she holds the same kind of power or staying power. I wonder what the transition looks like from Elizabeth to Charles if the timeline had gone a little differently and Edward hadn't abdicated. I just wonder what that looks like. I wonder what the sentiment is.
And what are the implications for Charles' life? He wouldn't have spent 70 years being heir to the throne. Things could have gone differently for him, for Diana. So it's just the ripples from this.
I know. It's the what if game, the butterfly effect over here. But that is, again, a love story question mark. Because I also think before we transition into the next story is that royal marriages really were a political alliance. It was to strengthen bonds with countries that you needed to be strengthened with, that you didn't want to go to war with, or had something that you wanted or needed. And now it feels like the alliance is more with the public.
Yes.
And yet this person the marriage has to fulfill so many things. It needs to be a working partnership. It needs to be an all-encompassing love story. It needs to be, I mean, there's so many things that it's almost an impossible agreement to fulfill.
It's impossible to get it right, I think. And this is why you have such a high rate of infidelity among royal men, I will say, because these marriages, here, I have a quote. This series of books by Leslie Carroll, this one's Royal Affairs. She also writes Royal Marriages, Royal Pains, like people who have caused scandals. But in Royal Affairs, she writes about most marriages being primarily political and economic alliances. So it's hard to vilify those imperial adulterers for seeking sexual satisfaction outside the marital bed. So basically saying like, hey, these are still people. They still have this desire for love and affection and physical contact, which a political alliance might not be doing it for you. So with this formula for marriage, which really only starts to be challenged, I would say, with Elizabeth and Philip in when did they get married? The 40s. You have centuries of royal marriages where infidelity is the rule, not the exception.
Yeah, it's not even, I mean, you have a favored mistress, you know?
And that's a court position. That's an official job, especially in France. It's a position that needs to be filled, and you are weird if you don't fill it. That's one of the reasons that Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette over in France got so much grief. There wasn't a mistress for the public to latch onto and attach all of their complaints to about government spending and lavish parties. It all got directed towards Marie Antoinette as the consort instead.
Yeah,
it just blew your mind.
And speaking of mistresses, this is another situation where Charles and Camilla have gone from being positioned in the media as the mistress, these adulterers, you know, and especially Diana dying, and slowly and steadily, with a lot of maneuvering from the palace, from the media, slowly the goalposts are moved, where she's no longer the mistress or the other woman. She's his true love. She is his life partner. Confidant. She is going to marry him, but she's not going to be queen. Don't worry. Oh, by the way, she's queen. Okay. Yeah. And that was a long time in the making to lay that groundwork down.
I think we should have talked more about that, but because Elizabeth II technically signed off on the queen consort for Camilla, we really glossed over it. But in the terms of, royal titles, royal maneuvering, and the branding of these love stories, that was a huge deal when the former mistress became queen consort. I think we need to talk about that, Meredith.
I do think we should have a deeper conversation into the Camilla Parker Bowles of it all.
I'll write it down.
Yeah, I really do. Also, my hot take, can I tell you a hot take that's going to get me canceled?
Always.
It's going to get me canceled. If I was at a dinner party with the current working royals, I'm telling you, sitting next to Camilla would be the spot.
Absolutely.
Okay. Because first of all, she was raised in all the how to sit and talk at parties. She's definitely going to give some goss. She's going to turn on the charm. And you know what? she's going to take a piece of bread out of that bread basket. It's not going to be like, I'm already so full.
I'm pushing peas around my plate.
Yeah. No. She's going to say,
she's going to drink some wine at that
Have you tried
dinner.
this bread? Have you tried it? It's lovely. We're going to, it's such a bad accent, but we're going to eat bread and she's going to give
gossip.
some juicy goss. I'm telling you, Camilla's who you want to sit next to at one of these parties. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I used to call myself a Camilla apologist. I feel like I've walked that back a little bit over the years, just because she is so willing to engage with the more insidious sides of the British press to get her love story with Charles, first of all, and her redemption arc in front of the public. But I do have to hand it to her. She knows how to play the game. And
she played the game. She said, these are the rules of engagement. She's also from that last generation of
she was a debutante.
Goes to finishing school and has a real reverence for, stiff upper lip and this is how things are done. And
I'm a country girl. I kind of all that horse.
Stuff. Yeah, I have a lot of mixed feelings on Camilla. But here's the thing. Here's like the wrinkle in all of this is that Camilla wasn't the only person Charles was sharing crackers in bed with. I wouldn't kick him out of my bed. So yeah, there's another love story, quote unquote. And that's another woman that the prince got around with, which was Kanga Tryon. Which
nickname.
What a nickname.
Not birth name, right?
Not birth name. Kanga was actually a nickname given to her by Charles. She's from Australia, kangaroo. I'm assuming that's where it comes from.
I think probably.
So her name is Dale Elizabeth Harper. She was born in Melbourne, Australia in January of 1948. She's a child that suffers from a lot of illnesses. She has Perth's disease, which is a hip disease. She has spinal bifida. She ends up getting cancer. So she goes through a lot. Her daughter has suggested that she might have been struggling with bipolar and, things that we didn't really pay attention to. She ends up moving to London. She meets Anthony Tryon, who's the third Baron of Tryon, sure, who was an old Eton friend of Prince Charles and in the inner circle. And that's how she really gets to know Prince Charles. They get along amazingly, Charles and Kanga. They love fly fishing because, of course, but her background does not make a suitable match for the future king. She's from Australia. She's loud. She's not title. I mean, it's all of these things.
Right.
And it's believed in the 1970s when all the Charles of it all begins. And so we're starting to cross timelines. She marries in 1973, Anthony, and they have 4 children, including Charles, who's the godson of Prince Charles.
Goodness. Okay.
And then 2 years after, Camilla has her son, Tom Henry Charles, also a godson of Charles. What a life. What a life. And this was the weirdest thing I've ever heard. I cannot remember the documentary name. I found some YouTube thing on Kanga and Charles. But apparently, whoever wasn't too pregnant at the time, he would jump to their beds.
That's like very old school royal. That's what Henry VIII did.
It's so gross, though.
It is gross, but like, this is hearkening back to the official court mistress and royal wives. Now, Diana does not play into this because I don't think any of this was happening with her consent. But back in the day, in the 16th century, royal wives would get women they liked in the king's bed while they were pregnant to keep him occupied, because it was understood that this is just something the king needs. He needs to sow his wild oats or whatever. And if he's not doing that with the queen, then you better damn well make sure it's with somebody who you can control, somebody whose sympathies you approve of. So Charles really, I've talked about this before too. He's playing the game, but without Diana's consent, the way
he's
that
just a
past
man.
royals used to.
Yeah.
He's just a guy.
You're just a man. This is during a time too where the way it's positioned now is, Charles and Camilla meet and sparks fly, but they can't be together because she's not virginal and for a number of other sins. But they're desperate to be together even when she marries someone and then he eventually gets married. But no, he's actually just kind of playing the field is what's happening during that time. And the Kanga erasure is real. Very funny, though, is that she ends up starting a fashion line.
I was going to say, that's what I know about her.
Yeah. And Princess Diana ends up wearing one of her designs.
Wow.
To an event where Camilla's also going to be there, which is so good.
Wow.
The level
Diana.
Of petty,
I was unfamiliar with your game.
So where things really get rough is 1890s, which is famously a time where Charles is trying to win back favor with the British public. We have the tampon tapes. the accusations of cheating, Diana's interview with Panorama, Charles's interview, the separation. There's a lot going on. It's not great for Charles. And this is a quote from an article from the 1990s about this time. At a time when he was trying to rehabilitate his reputation with the British public, Diana's death triggered angry accusations against Camilla, and Charles's reputation was in danger of going down with hers. The prince needed Kanga like a cat needs a dog.
Okay.
So, yeah, ow, first of all. Here's the thing, too. Kanga dies just a few months after Diana. So what happens with Kanga's story is that she's diagnosed with uterine cancer in 93. She has a bunch of surgeries related to her spinal bifida. And then 94, 95, 96, this is Charles admitting on TV to adultery, Diana's Panorama video.
We're glued to the papers for that era.
Charles and Di officially divorced in 96. In 1996, Kanga is cleared of cancer. She checks herself into Farm Place, the fashionable rehab clinic, to rid herself of dependence on painkillers, which unfortunately can happen. She falls out of a first floor window and shatters her spine. And she's paralyzed from the waist down.
Okay.
It's weird. The whole thing is just weird. Like, how did this happen? I don't know. 97, it gets sad. She's detained under the Mental Health Act. Lord Tryon announces that he's going to ask for a divorce. In August of 1997, Diana dies in a car crash. In September of 1997, the divorce is granted to Lord Tryon. In the fall of 1997, Kanga travels to India with her mother for homeopathic treatment by a doctor introduced to her by the Prince of Wales. But then in November of 1997, she's admitted to the hospital in the UK after complications from surgery related to bed sores, and she dies in hospital of septicemia on November 15th, 1997.
That's really sad.
I don't think there's a correlation between the two deaths, but they both pass away at similar times. And while certainly Diana's death was not good for Charles in terms of publicity, Kanga, no, because Kanga was loud. She had love letters everywhere.
Right.
She was
her falling into obscurity was a win for him, for
unfortunately,
sure.
Yes. And I'm not someone that's like they allegedly offed her. I don't believe that. She was sick. She had a lot of issues, and I think it's just a really sad story. But it also, she's a woman that history wants to erase because it ruins this whole,
it was
fit always neatly. Charles and Camilla,
right.
And that was his one true love. Well, kind of sounds like when you add Kanga into it, that he was just kind of, and who, we don't know who else, he was just kind of effing around until he had to settle down.
Right. And even after he had to settle down, because that's what princes of Wales do. They have multiple mistresses.
And I think this is a really apt quote to get us into the why men cheat. That's
why specifically royal men. I can't speak to all
That was
men.
Not a joke. And who they should cheat with, because this quote is from Christopher Wilson, a former correspondent for the Daily Mail. He says, quote, "It's well known in royal circles that if you are going to have an affair with a woman, make sure she's married. Make sure she's got more to lose than you."
Yikes. That's really insidious. That is really a not flattering read. But that, again, is royal tradition. Women could cheat on their husbands as long as they were discreet and had provided heirs, basically, throughout most of royal history. Now, if it got out in the public sphere that they had done this, sure, it wasn't going to go well for them. The system was always set up to support men cheating on whoever they wanted to and not women. But yeah, I don't know. Once specifically royal women have produced the heir and the spare, there is kind of this culture that allows the couple to go their separate ways and bed whomever they would like to in order to take the edge off being in a political alliance for your marriage.
And this is where I'm going to bring up William and Kate, but not
the way you think.
Not the way you think. But this is something that I think about with their marriage, where it appears, and I don't know these people, it appears that they have kind of more of a working marriage. I'm not saying they're not in love. I'm not saying they're not affectionate in their own ways, but they're not overly PDA people. I think they've settled into a routine where they have huge responsibilities.
Their mom and dad.
Their marriage. Their mom and dad. Yeah.
Their mom and dad, they have these 3 young children who they are trying to raise out of the spotlight, but also make them good, dutiful members of the royal family. That's a lot.
It is a lot.
So much of their branding, and this is all we see, the public perception of them. Their branding does revolve around the children and being mom and dad, this love story transitioned into being the anchors of the next generation of the royals.
I think the problem is, though, is that they, around the time of Harry and Meghan, because Harry and Meghan are a different kind of couple,
There's
and also
contrast there,
didn't have kids yet. I mean, there's a lot of differences here, and they're different people. But then it seemed like there was this push for, at first it was, well, Kate and William don't do that because that's not royal protocol. And then suddenly they're doing these things and it's okay. And now they're making this kind of crazy video.
Even when they don't do the PDA, we are putting a lens on what they do show us, which is a butt tap or a festive glance. And we are hyping them up because that's what the public wants to see, is this love story, this mad about the boy kind of affection.
I wish they would transition harder into the mom and dad portion of it and angling their love and romance through that. I also
look what we've built together.
It's also more relatable, but I mean, it's also more realistic, I think, which
but that's not what the people
want. The fairy tale.
Right.
It's a commoner marrying,
it's
marrying
a Cinderella story.
The future king. Well, okay, but the commoner is now in her early 40s and she has kids and love looks differently, after a while and transitions. And yeah, I just think there was a way to not be like, well, Harry and Meghan, blah, blah, blah. There was a way, I think, to do this that didn't hurt. I don't know. I just think the way they've gone about it with Kate and William has actually hurt them more. And then
Meredith, I think what you're identifying is a want for emotional intelligence in the way the monarchy runs and the way that we cover the monarchy. Is that what I'm picking up from you? Because
I
think
you.
I think you're going to be disappointed.
I'm going to need some aloe for that burn. But no, you're correct. And then, obviously it leads to the rumors that were quickly squashed about Rose Hanbury, the Marchioness of Cholmondeley, which is spelled with 15 extra letters.
Yeah. And I will just say, once again, the outlier in royal history is a royal man who doesn't have a mistress. That's all I will say.
That's all I'll say too. This is not, and this is something that is accepted in the upper, echelons of the society. You're supposed to keep it on the down low.
But I think it's like a social position that needs to be filled as well, because the Princess of Wales can't necessarily have these raucous parties the way that a royal mistress can to entertain people that William will need to have on his side as he enters into his kinghood or whatever. That is part of the deal in a lot of ways. Not to get too psychological here as well, but there is also some research and data that suggests that cheating and having affairs might be linked to either your genetics or your upbringing, in the sense that if you are seeing this pattern happen in your family,
well, we got both.
You are more inclined to do that yourself. And all I'll say is that for the current generation of royals, there's 1,000 years of infidelity to look back on, let alone the King Charles, Camilla, Kanga, Diana mess. So,
and I'm not saying that, again, we are not here to
we're not claiming anything. We are adding context.
Because nothing concrete has been found.
No, right.
I've always been interested in how the media covered this and then didn't cover it, and what trade-offs came in the media from not covering it anymore. But I think because we are now in a time where royal marriages need to be love stories and fairy tales, that really butts up against the tradition of having a mistress, of this happening in aristocratic circles,
right?
And it's just because of the change in the alliance
and
now.
What we accept as the
it's
public.
An alliance with the public,
right?
A buy-in continuing with the public to continue this institution. It's not because you really need Germany on your side, no one's marrying for that anymore.
Right.
Well, maybe, I don't know what's going to happen, but for now, we're not doing that. So, I mean, now that we've talked about cheating, happy Valentine's Day. What do you want to end with? I know you got something.
I mean, I'm a romantic, and I do believe that there are some royal love stories that actually are love stories. I mentioned Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI. I think they had a lot of love and respect for each other. They came from similar, not upbringings, but mental states. They were very naive, and I think they really cared for each other, and it led to their downfall. But there are other ones too: Napoleon and Josephine, Queen Victoria and Albert, and it's hard to sift through the history enough to figure out what's genuine and what's for the optics, but there have been some romances that I think are legitimate. So I have this book, Love Letters of Kings and Queens, and I want to read you some excerpts.
This feels like if the Carrie Bradshaw in the Sex and the City movie, instead of making up a book of poetry, which ended up getting published, they should have just read this.
This is, some of it's nice, some of it's funny. So Napoleon and Josephine, 1796. Napoleon's away with his army, and he writes to her, I have received all your letters, but none has made such an impression on me as your last. How can you think, my adorable beloved, of writing to me in such terms? Do you imagine that my position is not already sufficiently painful without further increasing my regrets and subverting my reason? So basically, I guess Josephine said she missed him. And he's like,
Guilt
how can
trip.
you do that to me? He also writes to her at another time. It was last night that I thoroughly realized that your portrait was not you. You are going away at noon. I shall see you in 3 hours. Meanwhile, my sweet love, accept 1,000 kisses, but do not give me any, for they burn up my blood. Come on.
Meow.
So Napoleon. There are some love letters from Victoria to Albert as well, who that's a royal relationship. There's a lot going on. But another couple that never had mistresses, or in her case, until after he died, maybe had some other romances. It was a political alliance, but also kind of not. Victoria did choose Albert because she liked him over the objections of some of her ministers who didn't want a political alliance with the German side of the family. Like, even at this time in the mid-19th century, this was something we were like, okay, do we really want to double down on being German, or do we want to be British? But she chose Albert because she loved him. And this comes through in their letters. She writes to him in 1839, this morning I received your dear, dear letter of the 21st. How happy do you make me with your love? Oh, my angel Albert, I am quite enchanted with it. I do not deserve such love. Never, never did I think I could be loved so much. It's cute. It's cute.
I love that. Hey guys, if you're looking for something to fill out your significant other's Valentine's Day card, I mean, this is some good
There's some good
material.
stuff in here. And it goes back, even Henry VIII, before he beheaded Anne Boleyn, I do believe he really loved her. And she started as a mistress.
Wasn't a great move, though, beheading her.
No.
Not great.
Not how you want these relationships to end. But I do think that we can, with a grain of salt, look to the royals for inspiration for romance. You just have to be wary.
It is interesting to look at the time and say, was this a political alliance? Was this something that, like you said with Victoria and Albert, some didn't even want because of, again, this push towards Britishness and what does it mean to be British?
Right. And sometimes it's both.
Is emblematic of that, and sometimes it's both.
Sometimes those political marriages do end up being true love matches, and that's something we see dying away as the motivations for a royal marriage shift as well. But I think that that's like my favorite type of royal love story. The one where it's like supposed to be very traditional and very uptight, but it ends up being like, no, they're just like, they really like and respect each other.
Well, a really important time that this came up actually in recent history was the Princess Diaries, where Mia, in order to get on the throne, she needed to marry, which is an antiquated rule that, of course, they threw out because queens can do that. Dame Julie Andrews. And but they started off as he was trying to thwart her best attempts, his uncle was, so that he could get, and they hated each other. And then
Chris Pine.
They fell in love. Chris
Do you know that was Chris Pine's first like major movie role? Was Princess Diaries too? Yeah.
He was yummy. I approved of that.
And they're making a third one. They're like in production.
I think we deserve this. I think this is what we need,
especially since the timeline.
Especially since they freaking canceled the Lizzie McGuire reboot. I think we deserve at least this.
I do believe that Gary Marshall wrote the screenplay before he passed, so there's something to look forward to there.
Oh, Princess of Genovia, I'm ready to greet you. I'm ready with my flavored popcorn.
Queen.
Oh, excuse me.
Genovia.
Queen of Genovia. I am deeply sorry for my disrespect. Do not behead me. So that is it for our episode. Remember, if you want that Patreon bonus episode for the month, we are doing red, white, and royal blue over on the Patreon. We also have a ton of fun things at the free subscriber level, different
video
posts
episodes.
And chats. Everything you can get over there. You can also watch this over on Patreon or get it a week later over on YouTube.
And a big thank you to our Patreon press secretary, Molly White, who... Girl, thank you for shielding us from all of the inappropriate press coverage of our royal romances over the years. We really owe you.
And Molly, thank you for not being in a political alliance with us, but a love match, because that's what this is. Molly is going to cancel eventually. I'm waiting for the day where Molly's like, this has become too much. And if you want to join Molly on that tier where you get weird shout outs from us, that's over on Patreon too.
An amazing plug. Yeah, keep the party going. You can keep up with us on Patreon and catch video episodes on YouTube. Until next time, Amanda and Meredith out.
We out.